is Stories from the Ground, Episode 1, featuring Scott Carey of Sump Coffee. Well, hello and welcome to the first in a series of episodes focused on showcasing the stories of great cafes and how they have weathered the COVID crisis. We're going to be diving into their stories and getting some great takeaways that I believe will help you all as we continue to go through this as an industry. Now, I want to let you know that you can get the takeaways for this episode in the form of what we're calling spec sheets. Just go to the show notes here and click on the spec sheets link, and that'll take you over to the website where you can download those. And those, again, are the main takeaways from each episode as a reference to you, a downloadable PDF. And I hope that those are really helpful to you. So follow the link in the show notes for those. Now, this episode series is brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. As we all know, the environment for retail is changing, and we need to be able to shift and be flexible. We need to be creative and use tools that allow us to do those things. The Ground Control Cyclops Brewer is designed to not only maximize the quality of your coffee, but also it unlocks new levels of creativity and versatility that you're going to need on the day-to-day life of your shop. The SCA award-winning technology allows you to extract so much more than you thought possible from your coffee, but the versatility is unmatched because you can brew anything from batch brew coffee, of course, to tea, cocoa, batched iced lattes, and cold brew as well. The sky's the limit here, and really the landscape of specialty coffee and specialty retail is changing. But in that change, the Ground Control Brewer gives you the control you need to navigate the changes with ease and with excellence. I highly recommend them. Go check them out over at vogacoffee.com. That's VOGA coffee.com. Okay, well, today, like I said, we're talking with Scott Carey over at Sump Coffee. I personally have known Scott for quite a while and love Sump Coffee so much. So Sump Coffee is an award-winning coffee roaster and retailer based in St. Louis and also in Nashville. It was born in 2011. There's a lot of emotional catalysts for the formation of Sump, and we dive into that story a little bit in this conversation here. They are a multi-time winner of America's Best Espresso Coffee Fest, also placing second in America's Best Coffee Shop in 2014. And to them, those are important awards, but the daily and weekly connections they've been able to create over the years with the people that enjoy their coffees is the most meaningful thing. And so we see Sump now as a company that is so very dedicated to excellent coffee, but also excellence in relationship and serving people through this amazing coffee experience. And Scott himself is just a deep soul. And in this conversation, he has a lot to share about the industry, about the history of Sump and how Sump has gone through the COVID crisis. And really, it's a extremely vulnerable insight into the mind and heart of an owner struggling with how to navigate all of the intricacies of the unknown. Scott gets right into the heart of the owner's heart. So I'm excited to share stories from the ground with you with Scott Carey of Sump Coffee. Well, Scott, welcome to Keys to the Shop. So glad to have you on the show. How have you been?
Been well. You?
Been all right. You know, taking a day at a time, just like everyone else, I guess. Getting into this kind of an environment and having, shops in different cities is a whole nother ball of wax, like with COVID and everything else. And we're going to get into that. And I'm curious right now because I think I know how long you've been in business, but how long has Sump been a business? When did you found the company?
We opened December 1, 2011. So that was when we opened the St. Louis shop. And then we opened the Nashville shop September 18th. It'll be 3 years this year.
What's the story of Sump? How did you found this company in St. Louis? You didn't come from a coffee background, but you kind of dove in head first.
It was very personal. Obviously, I was looking for some change in life. So this is maybe my fourth career or profession. I went to graduate school for chemistry. I left with a non-terminal degree, a master's degree from Berkeley. Then I went to law school. I practiced law, sort of worked for a couple firms. Then I joined a startup. And then, I don't know, my brother got ill. I just started, I guess, seeing the world a little differently. I think being in New York during 9/11 also had an impact in terms of like how random and sudden changes happen without any foreseeability. Like, for instance, what's happening now in this time of COVID or the pandemic, where there's not really precedent for what's happening. And I guess at the end of the day, I feel like the only thing that I was ever good at was just being a student. So I was maybe like in the 26th, 27th grade before I graduated or quit school, I guess. And the only thing I had built up to that point was a paragraph, really. I mean, so I guess I wanted to create something, and I had sort of, this is a long-winded way of saying that, like, I think around 2005, I lived in the East Village. That was when 9th Street Espresso had opened. I think they had opened maybe a year before. So that was their only outpost on 9th Street, all the way in Alphabet City. And I lived right around the corner on 7th and C. And so that was my first introduction to specialty coffee, although I never really nerded out about it. I just went in, got a cup of coffee. And the way I look at things in terms of beverages is that, you know, if you have a success or something great in your life happens and you're celebrating it, you know, at the end of the day, you have a pour of scotch, a nice beer, a nice wine, something like that. But the beginning part of the day, you can't really have something sensual that is a treat for yourself without people looking at you strange, you know, if you poured 2 fingers of scotch at 8 a.m. or something. So for me, that connection, or going to get coffee every morning in 2005, that was like sort of that moment of calm in the storm before the day goes sideways or goes according to plan or something. That was 10 or 15 minutes for myself. And so that was an anchor, I guess, to start the day, or a reference point. So when I started coming back to St. Louis, because this is where I'm from originally, and my brother was very, very ill and getting more ill, I was fortunate enough to be part of that process of him dying. I mean, you're very vulnerable when you're that sick, and for people to let you into their lives, it's an honor, because you know, when you're that sick, you can't control the myth of what you're trying to project in terms of your identity, or, you know, being master of the universe, or whatever it is you think you are, you aren't. And so I spent a lot of time with him and his family, and I guess I needed still that moment for myself to kind of collect my thoughts, or I don't know, you know, to think through how I could comfort my brother, or how I could comfort his family, or how I could comfort myself emotionally, and things like that. And I guess I wanted to build something. So again, it's a lot more complicated than that. When we originally said, hey, we're gonna do this thing, we're gonna have a coffee shop, there are a lot more components to it. My brother was gonna participate in building, because he was a carpenter, and so I never really done anything with my brother, because I took a different path in life, I guess, more academic. And this was an opportunity for me to do something with him, and I didn't realize, and no one realized, he was as sick as he was. And so we were going to work on this building. We were going to create that kind of experience in coffee that I thought I had found in New York. And again, we weren't going to create the same cup, but we were going to create the same experience in terms of intentionality. And then actually, when we opened, there was a motorcycle shop in the back. And so there was a lot more components to the concept. And we weren't roasting originally. And anyways, that's how it came to be. It was kind of just personal tragedy, you know, a little reinvention of myself. I think I didn't find a deep connection or a deep sense of satisfaction being an attorney. This seemed to be able to fit a lot of things that I was looking for 8, 9, 10 years ago. So that's how it came to be. And then, you know, what happened next is, you know, somebody once told me when we were building this space, they came by and they say, you know, you can imagine your customer base. So as you're finishing your countertop, or you're picking out your espresso machine or your grinders or whatever, you imagine your audience, your guest. But once you open the door, all bets are off. And so you have to be prepared to, do hospitality with maybe people that are going to come in that aren't hitting the mark in your mind's eye or something like that, especially if you want to survive. So it's always changing. And even, obviously what's happening now is changing so much from what I wanted to do 8 years ago when we opened this.
Do you feel that your experience with the genesis, all the circumstances that led up to the genesis of this shop, prepared you for the ever-changing landscape of actually, running the store?
I don't think anything ever really prepares you for something you can't imagine. I think being in business for 8 years has better prepared me for what's at play now. Whereas if I opened 6 months ago, I don't think I would have the depth of experience in terms of hospitality, in terms of working with a team, understanding of coffee, understanding what I want to do. I mean, that's also something that's like, complex too. It's like, you open your door and guests come in and everyone has an idea, like, oh, you should have pastries, or you should have this offering, you should have that offering. And it's really easy to get distracted. And sometimes you may not know the route to get where you want to go. But I think if you know what you want to produce, and you keep good notes, you hit upon it, and then you have your breadcrumbs, and succeed or fail, you can look back and say, this is what I set out to do. If you succeed, great. If you fail, you don't regret. It's not like, well, I listened to this other person, I did this thing, I never really got to try the thing I really wanted to do. So I think to have a strong sense, especially with so much competition in coffee, to have a strong sense in terms of what you hope to deliver to the market, because it's not like it was 10 years ago where you can be like, well, I'm going to go in this market where there's only like second wave coffee and I'm going to blow minds. It's you pretty much any market you're going into right now is already crowded with all kinds of third wave coffee. And so, you have to be thinking a lot more about what it is you're going to do. 10 years ago, when I looked at a lot of like roasters websites, a lot of people were writing treatises, right? Like in terms of like, I'm going to do so right by coffee, and some X is doing wrong by coffee, and I'm just going to do so right by coffee and make it good, make it the best. And I don't think that is I mean, everyone still wants to make it the best. I'm sure most people that open their door never say, well, I'm just going to make it okay. So even if I go someplace and I'm like, it's not my style and I don't like it, or I don't respond to it, that person or that company is not trying to be like, yeah, we just thought we'd make it okay, and we thought it'd be all right with everyone. Everybody's trying to survive and make it the best. And I will say, when I first started, I was a lot more judgmental. Now that I've operated a business for the last 8 years, the number of factors that go into single decisions is just overwhelming. And so I guess I'm a more relaxed person in terms of thinking about experiences I have outside of the shop. But I wouldn't say anything in my life up to this moment has really helped me address this moment, other than operating a business for the last 8 years, and at least understanding the drivers of what worked and what didn't work, and trying to see how they fit in this new landscape. And I would say, my prior career of like being a chemist or being a lawyer, how that helped me, let's say, run this tiny little business is both those professions, I feel, require you to pay attention to the details. Details are important, and to keep those details organized and relevant and stuff like that. And so I think when you run a business, there's a lot of details, but when you're creating a product that people are consuming, or a craft, if you will, I think understanding and managing those details are very important. So I think that helped me, I guess, think through what it is we are trying to create once we sort of hit upon what it was we were going to create when we started roasting. But I don't know that really anything in my life up to this point prepared me for, trying to operate a business when essentially, the government says shut down. Or I feel, especially early on, you feel really guilty saying, hey, we're still here. We're still open for business. We're doing curbside, when, people should have been sheltering in place. So a lot of kind of what we have done the last several months is not do a lot of social media, not do a lot of, like, we've been here. We want to be, as I said, that sort of anchor for people that have come to know us and depend on us and just take comfort in what it is we can do for them right now. But at the same time, there's a lot going on in the world, even outside of the pandemic. And sometimes it feels unclear or a little selfish to be saying, hey, things are normal, come buy a bag of coffee. So I don't know that, in answer to your question, I don't know that my brother's passing and what that was like is actually prepared for what's happening now, because this is brand new. I mean, it's even hard to look to a mentor and say, oh, okay, this is how this person did X or Y or something. You know what I mean? Like if I were, let's say, a mid-growth company and I was growing to the next size and it was like normal economic conditions, I could look to, somebody in the industry and say, hey, they started with one shop with a roaster, they grew into 2, 3, 4, and, try and reach out to them. And if they were generous, if they had the time or inclination, maybe they would give me some advice, and maybe it would be relevant to help me through what I was doing. But I think, right now you have giant corporations with thousands of shareholders, guessing and making things up right now. And unfortunately that's kind of the space we're at. And, but that's where innovation happens. That's, you can't try and make things up and say, well, we need to get back to what we were doing as close as possible before the pandemic. So it's like, okay, well, if we had these core kind of company philosophies and we are trying to deliver these kind of core principles, how do we do it in a new form factor? Or how does the new form factor inform or change what it is we are trying to do?
Let me ask you, before you mentioned that the decision, there's so many different moving parts and pieces of minutia that go into every little decision that gets made in a business, even a small business. And in this moment, it being so unprecedented, it's forcing people to make decisions very quickly just for survival. And so I guess as you're talking about innovation here and, looking back to core values, I would love to hear, like, how specifically, when this started to unfold with your business, like it did with everyone else's, how did Sump respond to it? And how did Sump innovate or pivot using your values? And how did you make those kind of quick decisions for the benefit of the business and the people?
Essentially, when this happened, I mean, it unfolded very rapidly, and you could see it not only like internally in our business, but you could see it on social media. You could see founders from other coffee companies that, I thought were like, just superstars, locking down, closing, emotionally crying, almost reading statements that felt like it was like hostage negotiations. I mean, it was just immediate. Like we saw within the first 6 days of this hitting the States in March, we almost saw all our B2B disappear, because everyone that was a restaurant or a hotel or anyone we were kind of dealing with or an office, they were all at home. It was all locked down. So that fell off a cliff right away. And I think a lot of the other, again, I don't know the drivers for a lot of other coffee companies, but I think, cafe and revenue or any restaurant, it's tough. And I think a lot of the drivers in terms of what makes a roastery/retail cafe with multiple locations successful are those B2B relationships. And once they dry up, the revenue drivers for a retail cafe aren't that substantial. And I think that's why you just saw a lot of places just hit a cliff hard. And, we're in the same boat, but we have two shops. So you see all that B2B just dry up. And so you see categories of sales or categories of business change. So grocery as a category went through the roof, right? So if you had a grocery store chain deal, that's where everyone was getting stuff to stock up to stay at home. So they were probably able to buy coffee, and you saw those categories go crazy, or you saw online sales go up. So I think like Stumptown said their online sales went up 200 to 300%. So you saw, instead of having B2B be big parts of the business, you saw direct sales to retail become a significant part of the business, or grow. Now, it doesn't grow enough to replace that revenue, but so that becomes something. So again, if you have enough time, if you have enough wherewithal, you're like, okay, well, we want to try and demonstrate the core values of who we are virtually, right? So if that's going to be how people and our base interact with us, how can we create the experience you would have in a retail space virtually? Or we had to, kind of pivot right away. All right, no one can be inside, and for a lot of reasons, I think for guests, it's so political right now, but for the safety of our staff, for everyone, it's like we went to curbside right away. And so I will say that Square, I think, had just acquired a company called Weebly in January. And we were able to basically plug into that, and they put a lot of their resources into that, so we could switch right to curbside. So a lot of things, like as a business, when we started, it was like, I don't want people to see paper cups. I want everything to be in porcelain. It was this very selfish experience, but I think a lot of people were into that about 8 years ago. It's like, all right, this is highbrow, this is intentional, this is purposeful. All that had to change, and we had to think through that, or every sort of sustainable effort that we were doing, like, okay, we're going to do away with plastic straws. We're doing away with this consumable. We're doing away with that. In March, everything is single use now, right? So it's like, how do we make all that fit with like kind of core identity things we were trying to do? And I think, honestly, I don't fully have an answer. I think having technology that's kind of readily available that we could plug into, and that has been improving during this pandemic, has been helpful. So we never had any kind of order in advance curbside element. So essentially everything became that in St. Louis, at least. The aspect of, we've always done online sales, but the aspect of what that means now, or how we kind of demonstrate our core values for people that are at home shopping on a website when they have a bazillion choices, and to shop at every roaster that's pushing out product. What do we do internally? So, I feel like the hardest part for me when this whole thing hit was, how do we keep people employed, and how do we keep them safe? And honestly, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the answer. And, thank goodness the federal government stepped in, but I did not, like a lot of other businesses in hospitality, I did not build a business that had so much cash reserves that I could keep everyone on the team for 4 or 5 months when revenue dropped anywhere from 30 to 50%. So, I felt like a failure. And I knew by letting people go, we're letting them go in an environment that, like, it's, again, unprecedented. It's like, you read the numbers, 30 million people applied for unemployment initially. I know the numbers are different now, but I'm such a small company that everyone that works here, I'm sure you'll find people that disagree. They're meaningful and important, and they're not fungible. It's like, if I could run this business by myself and deliver the experience that I want to deliver, why wouldn't I, right? So any success we have, especially like in Nashville, any success we have at a distance, it requires the team. It's not because of me or because I have a bald head or I have a beard. It's because the team showed up and delivered a meaningful experience and related to people that decided to come check us out. Sitting at that moment and trying to, like, okay, we're going to keep everybody. We're going to keep. That was the roughest decision I've made as a business owner. I mean, emotionally, I don't want to admit it. I'm not an emotional person, but I cried when I had to make that decision to let people go in this environment. And I'm, whatever your politics, I'm glad the federal government stepped in and created a little bit of a safety net in this uncertainty for people that were able to get unemployment. My responsibility is obviously to deliver a superior coffee experience to guests. People have a choice where they work, and I'm not creating another Google. So it's not like people can come and say, all right, I'll work 80 hours, but I'm getting stock options, and in 2 years when they IPO, I'll be a millionaire. People are coming here to stand on their feet for anywhere between 6 to 8 hours a day, do hospitality. Hospitality is hard. It is hard. And not everyone is nice that comes through the door. And orders a coffee or orders a, whatever it is. It's challenging. And, again, like all the frontline workers, it's hard, I'm sure, to be running a grocery checkout line. They're not making a lot of money and they're taking a lot of risk. And so, yeah, that was very hard for me to do. And that's one thing when I think about, a lot of your sort of questions and things are getting into, like, how does COVID change? How does COVID change business models? How does COVID change all this stuff? Well, I feel like one thing that it changed is I don't know that I want to grow a business that I'm responsible for, 20 people's livelihood. That's a big deal. You know what I mean? Like I've had like team members like complain about, oh, I got rent to pay, I got bills to pay and all that stuff. Everybody does naturally, right? As a business owner, essentially I have 20 rents to pay, right? We have to create something so that everyone goes home at the end of 2 weeks and has money so they can, justifies what it is they did. So it's extremely stressful. And so when I think about the future, I guess I think a little bit about a leaner model. And I don't know exactly what that means. If that relies more on technology, which a lot of people are talking about now, even outside of coffee, is how technology is basically replacing some of the people that were furloughed for COVID reasons, and those positions might not be back. So is it robotics? Is it software that queues orders? Is it, different ways of doing business, like, DoorDash and stuff have DoorDash kitchens, right? So, I mean, how does that work? How does that look? I've gone on a very long time about this, but that was very hard.
You mentioned curbside, which is, something a lot of people are doing. What kind of things are you seeing now with your business and employing now with your business that is helping give you hope for your business, even that, hope for the people that are depending on your business for their rent, like you were talking about? Have there been things besides the curbside service that you've employed to be able to, do that well, to keep the business going well, that have been really integral at this moment?
So the answer is yes. And so I'll give you a little explanation and then give you some specifics about what we're doing. So I think the landscape the last couple of years was more about building these coffee palaces. for experiential retail. So it was like ways to like, how do we minimize the espresso machine so it's out of the way so we can be more about hospitality? How can we build out a space that's just awe-inspiring and serve coffee? And it's almost creating these, like, I used to call them coffee cathedrals. And so when you build a space like that it's not necessarily about the quality of the cup. It's about many factors. Now, when you say, all right, you can't come inside anymore. What do you do with an empty coffee church, if you will? What's the business model? Like, if you can build bigger and bigger and better, like Starbucks built a 35,000 square foot coffee palace in Chicago, looks like something like from Harry Potter, and just people build these really, really impressive spaces. Now you can't have coffee that way. Now people are uncomfortable having experiences in enclosed spaces. So what do? So we've offered bigger bag sizes. Like before we just did 12 ounces, and I felt like the direction was, 250 grams in the market, at least kind of a European experience. And so we're doing 2-pound bags now, retail. We didn't do that before. And they're cheaper, because there's less packaging. People enjoy that. I think people recognize that, hey, there's value here. They can stock up. They don't have to come out as much. They're like, okay, well, I've got coffee for 2 weeks. We're building drinks that I think that are more related to, I guess, something either more comforting or more complex in execution. Like back up 7 years ago when we made drinks, I drew some pretty hard lines and I burned a lot of bridges. So, no cream, no sugar, no whatever it was. Very juvenile and very selfish kind of hospitality experience. But I wanted the coffee to shine. I wanted the coffee to tell the story. And I feel like it's much harder to have the coffee tell the story when it's in a to-go cup, or the timing in terms of making and running it to the car is off, and so it's not hot enough or not in the pocket that it needs to be in. And a lot of people are brewing coffee at home, and so if they're good, they're hopefully creating the same experience that we're creating for them, but they're doing it in ceramic and they're doing it in the comfort of their own home. So we're trying to create drinks that I think are comforting, and those drinks are sometimes maybe guilty indulgences. So like I see, just as a category for us, I see sort of the latte drink category growing a lot right now for us. And I see us and the members of the team thinking through how we can build that drink category so it meets people more where they are. And when I say latte, I don't mean just milk and espresso. I mean maybe milk and caramel and espresso, or vanilla and caramel, or graham, or so. Creating something that's comforting and a little bit of a guilty indulgence, and something that people can't necessarily execute for themselves at home. So, you saw that instant coffee craze, that kind of Indonesia's tweeting instant coffee craze. So I think people want something comforting, and they want something that they can't do for themselves at home right now. They want something of value. And so those are elements, and those are things we're trying to deliver to them, as opposed to be, selfish and say, well, this is the coffee experience that we're offering. Come and take it as it is. That coffee experience is still here, and there's still a group of people that are looking for that. But I don't know. I just noticed something, even like there's a former barista that worked for us in Nashville. He came by, he picked up a bag of coffee. And, again, he's a hardcore coffee person, so usually brewed coffee and espresso, so kind of always kicking the tires, checking the quality, things like that. And we put a new drink on there in Nashville, and he got a bag of coffee, and he's like, I want this. And I want it because it's going to make me feel emotionally better right now in the storm. And so I that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to meet people, I guess, where they are. And it's difficult to find, to figure that out. But I think value is important. That their ability to be able to kind of bulk up, because the storm's not over, and for them to be safe at home, or to have what it is that is still represents normacy for them. And then when they do come out, I think to deliver an experience that is something that they aren't creating for themselves. So maybe they're brewing coffee every morning. So when they come out and they pick up a bag from us, maybe they're not looking for brewed coffee. They want, again, something comforting, something indulgent, something thoughtful, something of excellence. How do we offer that? How do we message that to the market without people that have been following us for 8 years being like, oh, they're selling out, or oh, they're changing their theme, or whatever. It's kind of like being in college. You like a band and it's kind of underground. They put out their first album and you're like, yep, this, and you kind of claim them, you wear the shirt, and then I don't know, they blow up and they have their second or third album, and you're in your dorm room, and that one person that you just think has no taste, culture, or class at all, they're walking around in their shirt, and you're like, what this sacred thing you're taking away. So it's kind of like trying to just balance that balance the that core group that hopefully we've cultivated over the last several years with where people are at psychologically right now.
Yeah, that sounds very very smart. And of course, we see a lot of people selling half-gallon lattes and cold brew, and that right alongside, like vanilla ice latte, not like half gallons of plain lattes. Mostly, it's like a vanilla half gallon of latte, right? And the same shops that would never have done that in their lives before, they would have been dragged on Twitter or whatever.
Yes.
I feel that maybe we're getting a little bit more mature as an industry, and we can appreciate the connection element of our industry more than the the amplification of our own ego. And so this has been, if nothing, proof that we can extend beyond those slightly trivial things to connect with people. It kind of makes me think of how, since you're doing this for your customers and you're empathizing and trying to meet them where they're at, your staff are under, hospitality is hard, but in a pandemic, it's magnified to an unknown degree. How have you pivoted to be able to really stay in connection with and care for the staff that are still working during this time?
It's a good question. So try and impart that this new way of thinking that we just talked about, but also this is an opportunity. Hopefully we're still providing the same foundation of coffee. So if they joined us because they like what we're doing, or like kind of our approach and style, we're still that's still the underlying coffee. I've not made a green coffee buying decision in any way that changed from prior to the pandemic. So we're still buying quality coffee. We're still preparing it in the same way in terms of roasting it, cupping it, deciding when we have a profile that we're going to go to production with. But it does allow people maybe, or what we're trying to allow people is it allows creativity. So this is a time for people who kind of maybe are into mixology or mocktails, or ways of thinking about what it is we're producing that's maybe not so linear or not so rigid, to be creative. And so one thing we're doing is, the things we are putting on the menu, we're obviously trying to meet people where they are, but we're also doing a lot more R&D. So the last couple of Fridays, we created a new drink just for Friday, and it usually overlaps Saturday, And that's it. And then so each Friday we've been doing that, it allows team members to find hopefully some sort of expression. And when they hit a home run and it ends up on the menu forever, I mean that's great for them. I mean, it's a great validation and acknowledgement of their skill and talent. And I'm sure they're thinking about the market and what the future holds for them too, at Sump or otherwise. So I guess I'm hoping that we can ask them to be more creatively expressive, and that provides an incentive for them. It's not like we're like, okay, we're just getting a bunch of pumps here, and whatever pumps people want, that's the new model. So the core is still the coffee. What we've been doing with coffee for the last several years, the buying model, everything we're doing with it, still the same. Now, how we make it different is kind of how we finish it. And I think my thinking on this has changed a lot, and it's changed a lot because of competition. So when you could move to a market where there was no specialty coffee, and you could be kind of a rock star, you could provide something unique just by showing up and being conscientious. When the market is so saturated and so crowded, I think to be successful, you have to build a brand that people can relate to, or at least the demographic you're going after can relate to. But I think you have to own drink categories. You have to be creating stuff that is not fungible or is not available essentially at the next cafe over. So you can have coffees from Rockstar Farms, but years ago, for instance, when we bought coffee from Las Lajas for the first time, it was about 7 years ago. Their fame and reputation has grown exponentially since then, and people know that's a great brand, and that is available in many, many spots. But they've only been doing that for 13 years. So I think, and that was when they ran out of water because of an earthquake. So if everybody can get the same green, and if everyone's reading the same Scott Rao books or whatever, we're all going to be producing a very similar or very clustered product. Now, some philosophies change a little bit, that experience. But if you can't create something that is a drink category that you can own or be the author of, along with a number of other factors that make a business successful, it's hard for people to want to pay attention to you in the market, I think. And so, long-winded way of saying, how are we taking care of our staff and not alienating them if they came to do only specialty coffee in a hardcore way? I think they have grown too, because I think years ago, when you wanted to do specialty coffee, there were a few gatekeepers, and so you had to get jobs at those cafes. Now, if people want to do specialty coffee, they can sort of get it out of their system and be like, yeah, it was all right, because there's so many more opportunities, and then move on to their next career. And so I think for people that have stuck around and maybe have moved through a couple of shops, I think they realize, again, maybe what you're talking about, maturity, this breadth of what's possible. And I think saying it's an opportunity for them to hopefully be creative without having to come up with the capital and risk and headache of opening their own shop. So hopefully that's rewarding. Outside of that, I mean, I don't know. I want to treat everyone as an adult and with respect. So, we talk a lot in this conversation about COVID, but I think what else is happening here that is changing the environment, not just COVID alone, the business environment, is what's happening in this moment of social consciousness and cultural change and awareness and sensitivity and awokenness, whether it be gender politics or Black Lives Matter, but any of the social consciousness. It's like years ago, let's say if you ran a business, you're just worried about Yelp, what people would say on Yelp. Now you have to run a business and you have to be a good person because your employees have the ability to essentially kind of do the same thing that maybe Yelp did and destroy your reputation, destroy your relationships if you are a bad person. And so, you have to be a lot more thoughtful, not only about what you want to make, but how you want to make it and the team you want to make it with and how you're going to treat those people. And then COVID comes up behind this. And then it's like, well, wait, the entire delivery system for the business model has changed. So I think it's important not to just think about, a pandemic or a contagion, but to think about what's happening socially right now, in terms of workplace dynamics and marginalized voices that people have ignored for years, decades, centuries, in some cases. So it's a very powerful moment, and it's kind of redefining a lot of stuff. And I think the two together is really, 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 I mean, I don't have an answer for it, but it is very much a watershed moment.
Do you think it's fair to say that it's forcing us to be better? Like you said, just being a good person. And so many people have the business worries on their mind, and their focus is very myopic. It's the numbers on the back office, POS, and they maybe don't show up in the bar very often. But what you're saying, and what I see also, is that there's a lot more presence, there's a lot more communication that's needed, there's a lot more empathy and just affirmation that's needed, and a whole more of a holistic present style of doing business and being a business, which seems kind of funny to say, because that's simply it seems like that's what the community wants a coffee bar to kind of be anyway. And maybe it's just that we're closing the gap between what the community kind of has hopes for us to be and what we wouldn't let ourselves be up into this moment.
Yeah, I would say yes to that. I would say I am not necessarily, at least up to this point, have I been a good representation of that? I mean, I'm present. It's a small company. I'm very much involved in what we do and how we do it, and I'm not just looking at the books. I actually don't look at the books. My partner looks at the books. So, but my goal, again, thinking selfishly, is like, we're going to make the best coffee. We're going to blow minds. Best coffee, best coffee, best coffee. That's all I've ever said. And when things go awry, it's like a personal failure. I kind of get upset. I get grumpy. And over the years, have I been able to, again, be affirming? Have I been able to be uplifting? Have I been a good leader? Am I a good leader? I don't know. I feel like the only thing I know is coffee, and I know it in a certain niche too. I don't know the entire spectrum of coffee. I practice coffee in a very narrow niche or spectrum, and that's it. The other part, the leadership, running a business, you highlighted at the beginning of this talk. I did not come from a background in coffee. I did not come from a hospitality background. I did not run restaurants. I wasn't a GM. I didn't understand how the dynamics of all this work and then go into this role. So a lot of my education, not only is education in coffee and understanding relationships with guests, but also understanding, what it takes to create a team. And in some years we've been lucky. And I think because of that luck, I assume creating a team was easy. And other years it's a lot harder, and it, everyone's motivated by different factors. But what you're saying is 100% correct. We have to, it's a lot of work, and there's not, I mean, honestly, I don't know kind of who you talk to, but we have 2 coffee shops, but there's not a lot of money in this. Coffee as a input is very expensive if you're buying what it is you're saying you're selling in specialty coffee. It's not necessarily like beer, where it's just sort of grain and yeast and labor is involved and time's involved when you're doing beer, but usually the input cost to make a beer is much cheaper than buying, responsibly sourced, high scoring coffee. If you believe like some of the published reports that companies do, it's averaging, $4 and up per pound, and then you're selling it, and a pound in isn't a pound out. So this is a very, very, I don't know. It's not an easy win, especially in this crowded market. And so if you're just like obsessed about kind of hospitality facing, creating a great product, and you ignore the inside, now you have to have that holistic approach, and it is a lot more work, and it takes you, I think, as a leader, as a boss, as an owner, or whatever you are, when you're in that role, you have to be able to say, hey, look, I'm not always awesome, and I could learn a lot from the people that are essentially maybe reporting to me, or I'm signing their checks or whatever, and it's time to pay attention. And again, I just want to make a great cup of coffee so that if somebody's having a bad day, or their morning's going to be rough, and it's just like they can drink it and it's intentional, and they're like, this is what I need. This is what, again, that back half of the day when you have that glass of red wine or whatever it is that, turns you on, that is a reward, that you're just like, yes, my day is ended. That's what I think coffee does for the start of the day. And that's what I want to do. And all the other elements around it is very challenging, but they have to be on point now. And that's what I've been trying to learn and pay attention to, is to make sure they exist. But yes, what you said, being holistic and understanding and being a good leader. And, I didn't go to business school. I didn't go to management school. I don't know what it means to be a good leader sometimes, because I'm just thinking, I want to make great coffee and I want people to enjoy it. That's it. That's my equation every day. I'm like a dog that sees a squirrel. I'm just a squirrel. I just like, okay, this is good coffee. This is, we just sample roast all these. These are great coffees. We're going to bring these in. We're going to roast them. We're going to present them. We're going to brew them this way. And I just hope that people drink them, relate to them. And that's the goal. But there's so much to that. If that were the only thing involved, we could just have a drive-up window, and that would be enough, right? People wouldn't build coffee palaces or cathedrals or do all the things they've done and make the investment. The cup would be the answer, but it's not. And so I think, honestly, coffee and cafes do need to be holistic and take on a lot more social responsibility, or need to, or at least understand what aspects they can take on, and just clearly address it. You can't take on the whole world. You can't solve all the social ills. Again, 5 years ago, it felt like the people that were leading were just like, okay, this is what the science says. This is how you make a cup. A lot of those people, it's turning out that they created toxic cultures, and that I don't want to say they're canceled, but just creating that great thing was not enough. And they should have, like we all should, I guess, be looking internally and making sure that, we're good people. And at the end of the day, when my brother, let's say when he was sick and dying, and I obsessed, like, how can I help him? How can I help him? I thought, I'll go to medical school, because I felt like his bedside manner, what he got, was like so cold and brusque. And I was just like, I can be a better doctor. I'm smart. I can be empathetic. And the only advice I ever really got when I read was, write your eulogy now, before you're sick, before you're dying. And what you put in there is how you want people to remember you, or what you want to be remembered for. And take those points and start living your life that way. And I think that's what we need to do. Sometimes you're like, I want to achieve, and then I'll be good later or something. And I think that a lot of people in businesses have sort of run askew, or run away from something core or important, or forgot to take care of some of that in their quest to do something great.
Well said. And that, I think, is a powerful point to make, that you want to basically be looking at legacy right now and not later. And that's what you're building, whether you know it or not now, that your shop is going to be a part of somebody else's legacy too. And it's a part of everyone's lives that interacts with it. And so being purposeful as a leader to do that for yourself, it has an immediate impact on the business, because it's distilled into so many different areas of the business. My final question to you would just simply be to say, like, what final piece of advice would you have to owners right now who are trying to, still keep their head up and get through this time, that you feel is advice that would really be critical, in your opinion? If everyone would just adopt this, it would really make a difference in their business.
I don't know that I can answer that in a way. Well, I mean, if you love what you do, treat people nice, make a connection. Don't get into this business thinking that it's just going to throw off a bunch of money. This is a lifestyle business, and basically be in it because you want to relate to the people that you're gonna come to depend on as a business. That you want to relate to the team that you build, that you're going to rely on to build your business. Don't do it in a way that is, you think you're going to helicopter in, helicopter out. Even owning a business, and if it's your passion and you love it, it's still a job. And there are points in that process that you're not going to like, or you're going to have to convince yourself to get out of bed to do. Even though you're the owner, your team's going to feel the same way. Everyone's going to feel the same way. That's what a definition of a job is, in my opinion. It's going to ask of you. It's going to ask of your time when you might like to go ride your bike or play drums or something else. Make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, for reasons that are, I think, personal and significant for you. I mean, that's the only way I'm going to make it through this. If I thought of this as like, having a coffee roastery is just a market opportunity, and I can market up X and I can do Y, I think the struggle would be too much for me. Because I think the requirements to be successful of what we've talked about being a good leader and a good citizen to your team, and navigating through what the new buying model is in this environment in terms of what it means to have hospitality. I mean, I feel like hospitality now is almost hostility. It's like, you gotta be telling people to put masks on, or to back up. It's almost like, do you ever think of like TSA as being hospitality? But that's sort of what it feels like now. You know what I mean? It's like you can't be that generous host anymore. You got to be like, oh no, you got to back up, go outside. I'll meet you out there. It's just, I'm hopeful because I want to be around, and I'm not closing up shop, and this isn't easy. So I'm hopeful, but I think to be hopeful, I think you have to have a connection to this business and what we're doing in this sort of cafe. There are elements that have to be drivers for you, and try and hope that we go back to what it was like pre-COVID, but be realistic and plan and think through to something new or innovative in terms of a model, in terms of diversification. So, maybe that means explore grocery if you've never did grocery, or, diversify the model. Make sure if you can have people come inside and you have one of these coffee palaces, make sure you can also pivot to curbside or walk up, because there are going to be people for a long time that are not going to feel comfortable coming inside, even when they can, and everyone waves the all clear. Don't compromise. Don't change your soul or whatever you think your core philosophies and ideologies are, but think through ways in which you can deliver those core philosophies and ideologies which you had pre-pandemic in new form factors or new ways of doing business. So you want to diversify your model. And even if this all goes away, the idea is with climate change and other things, there can be other pandemics. And so you should be prepared next time with a diversified model. Again, I think people that had grocery and online points did a little better than people that were maybe just depending on B2B or in retail experiences. So I think you can take all your core values and think through how you can repackage them for different points of service or different points of sale.
I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us about your experiences here. And what you've shared, I think, is really, really insightful, and I think is very helpful. So thank you. And I want to know where we can go to find out more information about Sump Coffee.
Well, thank you again for having me. I'm sorry that I have a tendency to run on and on. If anyone, I guess, is interested in Sump Coffee after this conversation, I think a good starting point is our online site. It was just sumpcoffee.com. If you happen to be in Nashville or St. Louis, there's a possibility of directly experiencing maybe what it is to have coffee at one of our cafes. I don't know. I'm making it up just like everybody else, and I wish everyone the best. I know in coffee or hospitality or whatever it is right now, everyone is hurting, and the best kind of thing I heard that sort of like knitted it all together instead of everyone, just being in the same ship. Somebody said, different ship, same storm. So we're all sort of there together, and I feel like that's the one thing I take solace in, is that this is not just uniquely happening to me, and that don't personalize it so much that you end up depressed. This is a time of change. This is a very fluid moment in history, and this is a time for us to innovate. A lot of our thinking and what we did and what we went after before pandemic, we decided post-pandemic that we'll probably be a smaller business and kind of pick the things that I think that relate to us more personally, as opposed to go after everything because we're competing against all the other specialty coffee shops, I guess. So this is a moment and an opportunity to do some internal auditing, to do some soul searching, to do some reinvention, and kind of ask yourself, what's been important to you the last couple of years, and refocus your efforts so that, again, you find the joy and you find the value internally for yourself and for your team and for your guests, why you started the business that you started to begin with.
Excellent. Well said, Scott. Thank you so much again. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, man. You be well, you be safe. Hopefully our paths will cross soon again.
Well, out of all of the practical insights that Scott gave in terms of menu items and methods of sales and just different business things that I think are very valuable, one of the things that I see as being so important that he brings up here is the approach of humility in all of these things, especially his comments on repackaging your core values. As in other words, like, how can you create new inroads to your community through means that you might not have considered before, but that still communicate your core values, so that you can not come from a ego place where you're above certain ways of doing business. Especially now, I think a lot of us are more willing than ever to adopt new practices that we wouldn't have been willing to adopt before. But that seems like a necessary evolution, but also a positive one, because it opens up more connection with our community, and leadership that bases its actions on humility is sustainable leadership. And that's really what we want, isn't it? Is to sustain our business, to sustain our people and ourselves. We don't want to burn out, and we don't want to cause burnout in other people. And when we come at it from that approach, when we're being open to different ways of communicating our core values through humility in a humble way, then you can't help but have a positive outcome in that. So in all the practical insights that Scott has given here, definitely approaching it with humility and an openness and creativity is so key. And so if you want to learn more about Sump Coffee, just go to sumpcoffee.com. And with that, we have reached the end of our first installment of Stories from the Ground, brought to you by the Ground Control Cyclops Brewer from Voga Coffee. And remember, you can download the spec sheet for this episode by going to the link provided in the show notes. It'll take you to the site where you can download the PDF of all the main takeaways from today's conversation with Scott. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll have another installment of this series featuring 392 Cafe in Davenport, Iowa. Have an amazing day, and as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.